Guess who's back? That's right, it's Jean Price. It's her new fall season, and she's ready with more real conversations with real people. So make sure to tune in this Wednesday to welcome back our host, Jean Price, on Real Talk with Jean Price.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight on Real Talk with Jean Price. I am so glad you tuned in. As always, I want to thank my supporters of Real Talk over the last 2 years and putting the show together. And also, I want to thank my production team, to me, that does such an amazing job. We have some great shows that are going to be coming up in the spring and as the weather is going to be transitioning eventually. But tonight, we're going to be talking about something that kind of hit us all kind of hard in 2021. And I think we all can say that from a cultural perspective, it was very interesting navigating through what was going on in our communities, right? And what was going on with our police department. And it is definitely a privilege and an honor to have someone that can help facilitate and talk about the other side. And I think it's good to talk about the other side. I think it's good to share different perspectives and what it's like to be a police officer, but also what it's like on the other side to be someone that's in the community where we have faced such trials and tribulations. So tonight, it is definitely my honor and my privilege to welcome everybody. We want you to like, we want you to comment, we want you to share, we want you to get your brothers, your fathers, your sisters. We want you to tell people, come on and visit with Real Talk with Jean Price, because you know what I love about our show, because we're here as a team, is that we talk about real issues that affect real people. And you'd be surprised how the Bible tells us that what faith comes by hearing. Of course, hearing by the word of God, we understand that. But also, I'm saying tonight, hearing is so imperative because it opens up your understanding to something you might not have thought about, or your perspective might get changed once you hear what's going to be talked about. So it is an honor and a privilege to welcome to the show tonight Officer Horace Moore, a retired New York police officer. Welcome to Real Talk with Jean Price.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's definitely an honor and a privilege, sir, to have you on the show. This is going to be a great show because this topic, I think we all have so much to say about it. And again, before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to greet the guest, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. And of course, what made you decide to become a police officer?
Okay. So I did well, I became okay, let's start from the beginning. All right, so I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens, outside of what they call 40 projects. And that was during the era of where they had a drug lord called Fat Cat. And he is the individual that the movie New Jack City was based off of. So growing up as a young adolescent between the ages of 8 to about 12, I saw a lot of very graphic things in my neighborhood. I saw the interactions the police had with the people in the neighborhood, and I also saw what was going on with the drug dealers in my neighborhood. I had to walk by a dead body. I had to walk by little crack vials on the floor and things of that nature. So once I got to about to the age of 13, I made a decision. I saw where my friends were going, and the rest of my peers were going, and I said, I know where that road leads. I want to do something different. And my grandmother got me into the church, and she used to call me Reverend Gatemouth Moore. So before I became a minister, because I always had something to say, and I was always ready to defend somebody or defend a point. And then once I became a minister at the age of 13, I was always very community oriented because of all the work that I was doing in the church. So I got to see police officers on a different side than most people in my neighborhood did at that time. Then once I went to college, I was in school with police officers. And I'm like, okay, well, what I thought they were, the image that I had of them is not what I'm seeing when I'm with them person to person.
Right.
Then I got my degree in information systems and computer science, and I was out there job hunting, and I started my family. And I was like, okay, well, I can't keep working these jobs and then a year later I have to then go look for another job again and go through the interview process all over again. It was very difficult as a young, educated Black man to get a job that was where I was educationally deserving of.
Okay.
I would apply for certain positions and they say you're overqualified. So now I apply for a position below that. They say, oh, well, I apply for the position above it. They say I'm underqualified. And I apply for the position below. They say I'm overqualified. And that became frustrating because I have a family to take care of.
Right.
So working multiple jobs, minimum wage, I was like, okay, you know what? I'll just take the test.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what can it hurt? So I took the test. And then I started to work at Brinks doing security, coincidentally.
Mm-hmm.
Then a lot of police officers work there after work to make extra money. So then I was like, okay, well, so now I'm seeing, they're telling me how the police academy is. They're telling me how it is in the streets. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can definitely do this job. So when they called me, I was like, okay, I'll see what happens. I'll see, because with the NYPD, you work for 20 years at that time, and then you can retire.
Okay.
So I was like, I found out through the acquaintances I made at Brinks that you are fully vested at 5 years. Fully vested means if I retire at 5 years, 15 years later, I collect a pension for the rest of my life. And me, I'm thinking about dollars. That makes sense.
Right.
So I'm, okay, well, how can I work smarter and not harder? So if I take this job and if it doesn't work out, all I have to do is stay for 5 years. Then I'm guaranteed a pension for the rest of my life. So I was like, okay, fine. Went to the police academy. My instructors say, you're now leaving the civilian world to join the police world, the blue world, because it's two completely different things.
Right. Okay.
And it's like you have to change the way you think, you have to change your mindset and how you look at things.
Right.
And once I became a police officer, I realized that I had very good teachers in the police academy, and then I had very good training when I got out. They called field training unit. And they at that time they had the field training unit and Impact. Impact was a large group of cops just thrown in the hood and told to stop everybody. And basically it was cops that was fresh out of the police academy who had no experience. And I think that was how to make things more chaotic at that time with stop rushing, because it was just a lot of unexperienced cops doing things, not necessarily knowing the limits of the law when it comes to stops. Whereas when I was in the field training unit, I had a supervisor who had 25 years on the job, who was telling me, okay, this is what you can do, what you cannot do. And it was basically the three of us in the car for the day. It wasn't like 15 of us 2 blocks away from each other. It was our own. So I got to learn from someone who much more experienced, and that and my approach to policing was based on my experience.
Right. Let me ask you this question, Officer Amor. Did you have to return back to your old neighborhood?
Yes.
Let me tell you what I'm asking. It's almost like be working on a job. I remember because I retired too. I remember working on a job, but I was promoted as office manager, but yet I came up in the ranks. And believe it or not, people struggle because they're used to you being where they are. So what was it like when you had to return to where you came from?
So ironically and ignorantly, when I returned back to my old neighborhood, they was like, "Oh, you ain't no cop." This is how they talk to me. Like, you ain't no cop, no real cop.
Right.
Yeah, you one of those crooked cops. I know you. I know we used to do X, Y, and Z back in the day. So I know you're not a real cop. And it was like, yeah, I'm a real cop. So, and I'm like, yeah, I remember all the stuff we did back in the day. So I know that you hide such and such in the phone booth. I know all the spots that you have, So when they put me, actually, I grew up in South Jamaica. They put me in Far Rockaway.
Okay.
So to me, it was like, when I got to Far Rockaway, it was like the land that time forgot. And I used to tell people that, I was like, they were doing stuff that I was doing when I was 8, 9 years old. I'm like, what happened? Like, yeah, progressed. So it's like everything that they were doing. I used to walk through Redfern houses, and I used to tell them, I'm like, listen, the first time you see me, that's your warning. The second time, then that means you want to help me pay for my mortgage. That's what you're telling me.
Right.
I used to give them that chance, and they was like, okay, Batman, because I used to walk around with my stick in my hand. So
okay.
I was like, yeah, I gave them the opportunity to make the choice for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I told, I had the influence on the other police officers on my shift. Like, listen, this is what I told them. Because they don't know who's in the car. So it's like, you see the car drive by once, that means it's time to go inside.
Yeah, wow.
Time to go inside.
Right.
Time we come around, we're gonna stop you. Because now I used to show them, like, this is a high crime area. That's one criteria. 2, in Redfern at the time, there was always a high priority crime committed within a week period of time. So it's like, that's the second thing.
Right.
Third, y'all all are recidivists. So like you've been arrested before, so you're known to the system. So it's like, we have a reason to stop you.
Right.
When we see you standing, because NYCHA has certain rules, we see you standing in front of the building, you're not supposed to be loitering in front of the building. Now, do I agree that some of the rules that NYCHA has are targeted towards people of color and minorities?
Mm-hmm.
Behavior that we automatically do I feel that's fair? No, but it's my job to enforce those rules.
Yeah.
So now I'm giving you the opportunity to know that once you see us, you have to change your behavior, and if you don't change your behavior, then you have to deal with the consequences of that behavior.
Let me ask you, officer. We've been watching the news. It's been crazy, especially lately those officers that were killed, and they said 73 cops were killed in 2021, the most since 1995. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's the political climate, combined with the fact that everything is recorded now. So you have the rhetoric of the politicians trying to make it seem like it's a us versus them type of thing, and then you have the fact that everybody gets to see the reality of policing. And that not only in your own neighborhood, but you get to see it across the country. And what most people don't understand is that every police department in the United States is fundamentally different from each other. They don't have the same rules. We don't even enforce the same laws the same way across one borough to the next or one county to the next. You can Far Rockaway, borderline Nassau County, completely different set of rules compared to the NYPD. So what they do there, we're not allowed to do in the NYPD technically, or some things that they are allowed to do there. We can't do it in NYPD. So the behavior that or the encounters that someone had a block away with a police officer wearing a similar uniform, they then pin on the police officer that's a part of NYPD. And it's like, well, I didn't do that to you. You know? Or it happened completely across the country in Los Angeles or something. Now, oh, you want to do that to me? It's like,
interesting.
You know, because they saw it on social media or they saw it in the news and they apply it to us. I'm like, I'm just stopping you because you have a defective test. You telling me I'm profiling you and I'm about to, you want to kill me? You want to kill me? And it's like, nah, I just want to tell you your taillight is out, you know. Or,
but do you feel, Officer Moore, that it's been a lot of police brutality? We've seen it all. Like, and I love the point that you brought up. It's all over the place. So I don't know if people are just trying to find their balance, because it really does anger all of us when we see the things that are going on, especially to our African American people from police officers. Now, I'm not saying all police officers are bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, how do we, and that's what tonight we're going to be talking about, is how do we bridge the gap, though, between community and the police?
Well, like I said, there's different laws in different municipalities. So each encounter with a police officer that police officer is allowed to do different things. Right. And what happens is, if you're watching something, you're watching a police encounter in Wisconsin, and then you try to apply what that officer can and cannot do there to an encounter in New York City, the cop's going to look at you like, no, I told you to get out the car. Like, oh, that's I know my rights, because everybody's proficient in constitutional law in the streets at 2:00 in the morning. And it's like, no, just cooperate so this encounter can end. You can go about your way and I can go about mine. So it's like it makes it difficult for us to have successful encounters. And because everybody's seeing what's going on, it escalates real quick. Right. Because now everything that the police officer is trained to observe about certain people's behavior to determine whether or not they're going to be aggressive or not, you're displaying because you're agitated, because you're in fear of your personal safety. Right. So now your fear is causing that officer to fear, and then everybody walking. See, I'm about to start preaching. Everybody walking in the spirit of fear, and right. And then now that the situation becomes volatile. Right. You know, it could have simply been, you know, a simple encounter, and we go our separate ways. Right. And I'm glad you brought that point up, because some of it is fear. You know, people, the community or a pedestrian doesn't know what the police are going to do. The police might not know what they're going to do. And it's really sad that we live in a culture like we do today, especially with this is going on. But you said something that was very interesting. You quoted that scripture about the spirit of fear. Now I have to ask the question, because I don't know if my viewing audience also know that you are a pastor. So you and I were talking before the show began. How did you balance that in the sense of being a pastor? And I know that NYPD was your secular job, but how do you bridge it? Was there a time where your heart got caught up in what you had to do as a police officer and you had compassion? Well, I tried to look at policing from a different perspective.
Okay.
Where I was, it was a lot of my coworkers became hardened to the constant situation they were presented with day in and day out. And when I became a training officer myself, I would tell the officers, you're encountering most of the time these people on their worst day.
Okay.
It's their worst day. So you're seeing them at their worst. They're displaying their worst behavior. This is not them normally. This is not how they act on a normal basis. But if you see that enough, you think that this is how everybody acts. And then you see enough of the same people who look the same, who have the same skin color, act the same way over and over again. You believe that, oh, they're going to act the same way too. Right. And you develop a bias. And that bias informs the way you police. So now, instead of dealing with this person as the individual as they are, you come in a situation already on heightened alert because you know that the last 15 people decide to try to fight with you. So to prevent that, you're going in much more aggressive than probably you may have needed to be with this individual, but you're not even looking at this person as a single individual they are. You're basing your interaction with them based on your entire experience with the neighborhood altogether.
Okay, that makes sense. Got it.
If there's 3 million residents, but we have 300 knuckleheads, you're now basing how you policing based on those 300 knuckleheads to the whole group, and that's not fair, and that's what makes the community agitated with police officers, because it's like, you're not treating me as the individual that I am in this situation.
Right. That's true. Yes.
And adversely, the police officer is like, well, you're not treating me like I'm the individual that as I am. You're treating me like the uniform that I'm wearing. You're treating me like every horror story you ever heard on the news or read in the newspaper. No, people don't read newspapers now. Or seeing on social media. This is how you're treating me. You're assuming that I'm racist because I stopped you because your bumper is hanging off and your taillight is, or you ran through a red light. Now I'm racist because I stopped you, because this is my job. Now I'm racist. You know, and people used to call me racist, and I'm like, I'm black.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I'm not a little light skinned. I'm black. So it's like,
right.
No,
Interesting.
I'm doing my job. And then they tell you, oh, well, don't you got better things to do? Actually, what they pay me to do, really.
Yeah.
You know, so
get it. We're going to take a commercial break. Hold that thought, Officer Moore. I want you, because that was such a good point that you brought up, how even you're an African American and people thought you were racist. That's very interesting. Stay tuned to my viewing audience. We'll be right back. We're going to take a commercial. We're talking about bridging the gap between our community and our police. We'll be right back. If you take relationships, husband and wives, or marital relationships, because of the pandemic, people had to now deal with each other or deal with things they didn't have to deal before. Case in point, you're home all the time. You might have to deal with the pet peeves that bother you, but I found out that was a time that, you got it, the communication was challenged. There was so many different challenges that married couples face. Some people would wind up being on unemployment, so those financial woes became a tension in some relationships, and other things, just dealing with sexual abuse. If somebody, say there was a child being sexually abused, I found out that children, because of the pandemic, were home with the perpetrator. And I found out that was such a test for people having to get through that. And the reason it kind of falls under the guidelines of love is because then that other parent had to deal with what was going on with that child. So it was a whole lot of things going on in relationships during the pandemic. Welcome back. Welcome back to Real Talk with Jean Price. We've been talking to Officer Moore about bridging the gap between the community and the police department. And before we went to break, Officer Moore, we were talking about how people thought you were racist. And it's just very interesting. Now, was it African Americans that thought you were racist, or of other nationalities?
It was African Americans.
Our own people. Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Just because I'm wearing the uniform. Not because of anything I did or said, just because I'm wearing a uniform, and I stopped them.
Okay.
I wouldn't allow what people said and even what they did to a certain degree to take me out of my character.
Okay.
So therefore, I would take the time, even if the person was being a little difficult, to explain to them, this is why I stopped you. This is what I'm doing. Yes, you're within your rights to fight. Not here. You can fight in court. And I'm like, that's your right.
Right.
Not in the streets. And this is where most of the problems occur. People try to fight with the cops on the street.
Okay.
Win that.
Right.
You're not going to win that argument. You're not going to win that confrontation, because all you're really doing is showing that police officer that you're aggressive. And they will take that aggressive behavior, and then now you're resisting.
Right.
Now you're fighting. And like I said, the ugly truth about policing is that sometimes it is ugly. We have to get hands on. We have to get physical. As nice as I was, like I said, I was in the street for 12 years, and I had 2 complaints against me, and they weren't against me; they were against the person I was working with that night. So,
wow, interesting.
And I was in one of the, and still considered to be one of the roughest prisons in Queens. But because I treated people like they were human beings, so they showed themselves to be something completely different.
You know, yeah. As a woman, as an African American woman, of course, I never had fear like driving my car if I'm somewhere. But when everything started going on with the police and so forth, as a woman, like I would find myself afraid, like I don't want to get stopped by a cop, even for something small, even if God forbid you run a stop sign, because you didn't know, even as a woman, what you would face. How can we, as an African American community rather, how can we better assist? What can we do to keep the heighten of it down?
I used to tell people all the time, treat them like you want them to treat you.
Right.
They're people too. Just like you're having a bad day, they can have a bad day too. It's you have to understand that coming into the situation, y'all both are meeting each other at a time y'all didn't plan on. You didn't plan on meeting this person today, but you did. So now let's make the best of the situation, even if it's a bad situation. Even if I have to if I have to take you away in handcuffs, and I have to spend some time with you, let's make the best out of the situation. So I end up, then once I got them into the cells at the station house, I would talk to them. When now cooler heads can prevail. Let me explain this to you while I'm processing you. This is why I did what I did. This is why I had to do what I had to do. This is why I couldn't let this continue anymore. Or this is why I pulled you over. You were, you were driving 5 miles per hour down, Rockaway Beach Boulevard. That's entirely too fast and dangerous. You were drinking. So it's like, but you can't have those conversations with somebody who's not willing to listen.
Right. Okay. So do you think that stops the trust between communities and the police department? Because somewhere along the line, we have to try to regain the trust with the police department in order, because crime is happening all. In fact, when you watch the news, it's horrible out there. So how do we regain the trust though? I get it about not being aggressive and things like that. That's very important to handle ourselves with dignity. But how do we regain the trust? I think it's been shattered.
It's been shattered, but it's been shattered both ways for a long time. So I tell people all the time, when you move to a neighborhood, find out where your local precinct or district or division, whatever it's called in your neighborhood, and go visit. Go meet them in a situation where it's not your worst day. And that will then inform you when you have to be stopped by one of them. You're like, okay, well, this person's not that bad. I met them before. They actually shook my hand. They said hi. We smiled. We hugged. Well, not now because of COVID. But it's like, this person, they're an actual person. They're not evil. They're not the enemy. It's like most of the time when the police are stopping you, it's for a reason. They're not just making up stuff out of the blue. So it's like, if it comes down to accountability, you know your tail light was out. You knew your turning signal was defective. You knew that you ran the red light. You didn't stop completely at the stop sign, or whatever the reason was. You know that you and your significant other was fighting. You knew that there was a reason for these police officers to be there. So understanding that, and accepting your role in it, when you're dealing with the police officers, like, okay, well, you have to do your job.
Right. So now that you're retired, Officer Moore, Do you work in a community to help mentor young men that or women that might want to be police officers? How are you like active with that?
I am not anymore.
Okay.
Uh, I had to stop because of my health, which is why I ended up retiring early, 5 years early. I retired what they call the heart bill because all those years of me trying to be the bridge in the community between, you know, people who look like me and the people who look like the uniform that I was wearing. Um, you know, people don't understand the stresses that cops are under and the fact that a large amount of the cops are injured. They're working hurt. Uh,
Wow.
they're working with legitimate injuries. Like I have 3 herniated discs in my back, between my neck and my back. My hip was messed up. I've had 4 knee surgeries. And this is all from policing. I had both of um my well, I had the I can't even think of the name right now, but the surgery on my eyes, cataract surgery on,
Okay.
on my eyes because of getting into fights with people in the street. Um, so it's like, or I have bruises on my arm because I ran into a burning building to save somebody, and I got burned by chemicals that were in the building. So it's like police officers out there, and they're working, and they're hurt, they're being injured, and it's like all this makes them you don't want to get hurt again,
Right.
experience
Yeah.
to get hurt. But now it's like, okay, instead of me sitting here and try to take an extra 15 minutes and try to calm you down and work with you to where you are more compliant, it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to do this where I don't get hurt.
Right.
So
Okay.
now we're not going to sit here and we're not going to do all this stuff like that. You're coming with me. We can talk about it later. Let's go. Let's get out of the situation as quickly as possible. Because as long as you stay in the situation, at least this is what they train you, and based on my observation, as long as you stay in the situation, it increases the likelihood of you getting hurt.
Right. What kind of skills, Officer Moore, do you think that the police and the community leaders need to have in bridging this gap that seems to be here in light of everything that's going on? What can we do is we're also, leaders in churches. What can we do to help that?
I said this once I think about once I had 7 years on the job and I noticed something. The police department has a public relations issue. It's a communications issue. That's what it really is. If people really understood what the police officers were doing and what their job was and what their role, instead of going by the assumptions of what they see and what they hear, then it would be a lot less misunderstandings.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there are people who used to say, "Oh, I get stopped by the cops 5 or 6 times a week," and it's like, you know why? You're in a neighborhood where there was 15 shootings, there was 12 shootings, there's 15 assaults. So the police have to stop you if they see you in that area and you're around the area where the crime happened. They have to stop you. And then just because they stop you, I mean they're arresting you. They're going to stop you. They're going to talk to you. And based on your actions, they may frisk you to make sure that you don't have nothing on you that may hurt them. Again, they say that because they've been hurt or they know somebody that has been hurt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So saying that, here we have leaders, like I was saying, even to help the cops, because we don't want cops to keep getting hurt, but we also want to make it where there's a lot. And I like the word you use, communication. We want to keep the communication between us as clergy and the community and police officers. Are there any type of events and I know COVID is here because we can't do events like we used to, but what can we do even from a Zoom perspective or something to bridge this gap as clergy? It's so important.
Even with COVID,
Mm-hmm.
in New York City at least, you have neighborhood community offices, NCOs.
Okay.
So there's people assigned to each what they call sector. There's a car that's designated to deal with the issues in that community in that area. They go to churches, they go to the hospitals, They go to the small businesses. They're supposed to visit those places. Then you have community affairs, which is above them, which is they're assigned to the borough in that area. And then even above that, even in COVID, there's the appearance unit where you can request a police officer to come to your church and speak, or you can reach out just like tonight. You can reach out to someone who happens to know a police officer, and that like the late Bishop David Gates. He had me come speak to his entire youth department during a youth conference. Right after I can't remember this man's name right now, but the man that was that died in Staten Island, when the police officer was trying to arrest him.
I can't think of his name. Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember his name right now, but he had me come speak to the young people, and I explained to them, and one thing I simply said to them: Nassau County is not the same as the NYPD.
You're talking about Eric Garner. Eric Garner, right?
Eric Garner, yes. I was like, Nassau County is not the same as the NYPD, because Nassau County tends to have people, when they stop you, they tell you put your hands behind your back and get on your knees or lay down on the floor.
Okay.
They don't say that often. We do it, but they don't say it often. And because of that, most people don't want to get on the floor.
Right. Wow.
Now, instead, they're going to fight back. Why? Because they don't want to be on the floor. So it causes... It's just the things that we do because we don't know what that person has on them that can hurt us.
Okay.
Causes the relationship between the police officer and that person being stopped to be strong. Like, okay, I'm just trying to get you into a place where I feel safe. So we can
Wow. Okay. So, and Natasha chimed in and she said, I've heard my aunt say some of these same things and how communication is so important. And like what you're saying tonight, communication is very important in trying to navigate between the community. And I like what you said. I didn't know that you can have police officers go into your church and speak. That's very interesting, especially with our youth that's coming up. How do we prepare the next generation? If there's somebody that wanted to be a police officer, what would you tell them?
I would tell them go for it. Because I hate to sound like a commercial. The only way to see change is to be the change. You have to actually be the change that you want to see. You have to get involved. Because as long as you keep talking about what's not right from the sidelines, there's nothing you can do from the sidelines. Yes. You have to get in the fight. And protesting has its merits, but actually being there to be that person to treat someone the way you want to be treated is a big difference. Like I had to arrest this gentleman and I completely forgot about it. 3 years later, he chased me down on the street and said, "You changed my life." And I'm like, well, these 15 years, it was worth it. I did it for one person. That's it. He's like, "You changed my life." And he appreciated the whole entire encounter. He didn't like being arrested, but he liked the fact that I took the time and spoke to him, and that changed his life. He turned his life around, and I was like, "Great, that's awesome. That's all I'm here trying to do."
That's awesome. So, to our viewing audience, Officer Moore has said so many powerful things tonight and help us understand. And I thank you for this. And Natasha also said, "Thank you for your service. Thank you for helping us understand the gap." And I think it's so important to meet the police halfway, though we know there are times, and not you respectfully, but there are times when some officers, to your point, have overextended themselves in a bad way, toward people. But we don't want everybody put in that same category. So with the few minutes we have left, Officer Moore, somebody's listening to your voice. Tell them, you can speak from the perspective of being a pastor, because now you're on the other side, you're retired. So you have both perspectives. Give your last final words to our viewing audience tonight.
Oh, well, just remember that, we're all people. At the end of the day, we're all human. We all bleed. We all cry. We all get hurt. So treat people like you want to be treated. If everybody goes into the situation seeing it that way, then the situation will be that much better. If we just love on each other, you know, regardless of what we look like, what uniform we're wearing, what uniform we're not wearing, what neighborhood we're in, regardless of the situation, just treat people like you want to be. If I was stopping someone's child, I treat them like they was my child. If I'm stopping someone's mother, I treat them like they my mother. You know, and vice versa. Because just because I was a police officer doesn't mean I was never stopped.
Right.
You know, my car doesn't say police officer on it. You know, I'm driving a fairly expensive car, and because I still have friends in the hood, so I'll go visit them, and I would get stopped.
Wow.
But I didn't experience the same things that other people experience because, again, I didn't have the same bias to police officer when they stopped me. You know, so and even now after I got stopped way more since I retired than I've ever been when I was actually working, and and I found myself even getting agitated because of everything I've seen, and I catch myself, I'm like, this is not that person.
Right.
Let me treat this person for who they are in this situation.
Right. Well, to our viewing audience, thank you, Officer Horace Moore, for chiming in tonight, for explaining to us the other side. And that's why I think communication is so important. And that's what Natasha was saying, how we can hear from a retired officer what it was like. But also, too, you started out, like you said, in Jamaica on the other side. So thank you so much for being on Real Talk. To my viewing audience, again, as Natasha said, we thank you for your service. We want to thank you for being on Real Talk. And listen, for those that are watching, we invite you back again next Wednesday at 6:30, where we'll have a new topic and a new discussion with something you want to think about. Have a good night from Jean Price on Real Talk.